Hello everyone, this is Andrew from the Football Feast Extra podcast team, back with another episode of the FPL show. We do this every week. We go through our fantasy FPL league, we look at the performing teams, we look at who's doing the best, and we go through all of their teams and review them. We also look ahead to the next week. We look at the fixtures, we look at player statistics on who is best to put in your teams. So if you like the sound of that, stay tuned. That's all to come. And please like and subscribe. Follow all of our content so that you're first to see everything we put out. Let's roll the intro.
Yeah. Football feast, this the Football Feast Extra podcast. Hey, Football Feast Extra podcast. Playing soccer, grab your cleats. Playing soccer, time to meet. Playing soccer, time to greet. They finna talk a lot, okay? Playing soccer, get the cleats. Playing soccer, let's get it. Playing soccer, let's go. Football podcast.
Okay, let's jump straight in then. You can see here that we are going to start with the top 5 teams in the league. As you can see, Boys and Dahoud is still number 1. They're actually level on points now with Blake Howley's changed name team, 602 in total, and it has been getting closer as the weeks have gone on, and he's finally called him up. So 602 points for both of the top 2 teams. But as we normally do, let's take a look at Boys and Dahoud. This was a very high scoring week for most managers, so I'm expecting to see some interesting team selections here. Okay, so 87 points. We have Matt Turner in goal. 1 point for Turner. A lot of people probably had Turner this week, myself included. You would have thought it was a pretty nailed-on clean sheet. Of course, Nottingham Forest played Luton, but conceded 2 goals, Matt Turner, in that game. 1 point for him, so not a good week for Matt Turner owners. Dan Burn, 6 points, solid. Putting Newcastle defenders in seems to be the way forward at the moment. They keep a lot of clean sheets, so 6 points for him. Udogie with 1. A bit controversial this week, Udogie was taken off just before the 60-minute mark, so missed out on Tottenham's bonus clean sheet points. So only 1 point for Udogie. Very, very unlucky, really, for Udogie owners. Matty Cash in as the other centre-back or the other defender. 2 points for him in Villa's game. I think they played... Yes, of course, they played West Ham. 4-1 win for Villa, but no clean sheet for Cash. We then move into the midfield. Not a good day or a good week for West Ham players, really. James Ward-Prowse, 2 points. Didn't really get involved in the game. James Maddison with 9 points. Scored for Tottenham. Was upstaged a bit by Son, who we can see he also has in his team. 14 points for Heung-min Son, amongst the top scorers this week. Again, consistently Son is starting to put out the numbers. Miron with just a 1 point. Didn't really get involved for Newcastle. Mo Salah, the skipper, 32 points. This manager decided not to captain Erling Haaland this week and captain Mo Salah, who scored twice against Everton and got 32 points. So that makes up the 87 points. We've also got Erling Haaland, who did score, but Salah as captain was definitely the right choice. 8 points for Haaland and 11 for Ollie Watkins, who also picked up some bonus points. So a good week, really, for this manager. Let's look at the bench quickly. We've got Martinez with 3 points. Lascelles with 6 points. That was a good pick. We've not seen Lascelles, I don't think, in any of the teams so far this season. Obviously on the bench, so it doesn't really count, but a good pick. Archer with 2 and Gusto with 1 in that 2-2 draw against Arsenal. So let's look at team number 2. Blake Howley, who got 98 points, one of our highest scorers this week in the FPL league. Let's take a look. I'm expecting to see some big numbers here. Matt Turner, 1 point. We've discussed Turner, we've discussed Udogie, and we've discussed Gusto. So the first 3 players, a point each, 3 points. So, I mean, I dread to think where all these other points have come from. We've got Kieran Trippier, though, as the other defender. Such a good option. I keep saying this. I say this week in and week out on this show, that Kieran Trippier is a must-have in your team because he's just so reliable. Newcastle keeps so many clean sheets, and Kieran Trippier gets so many assists. I actually captained him this week Of course, Mo Salah was the better choice, looking back on it now. But I thought that the Merseyside derby would be a bit scrappy, and it was. But Salah did come away with 2 goals. But Kieran Trippier did end up getting me 20 points, so it wasn't an awful decision. But Kieran Trippier really is vital to have in your teams. We go into the midfield then, and it's the same midfield that we saw from the last team of Son, Maddison, Ward-Prowse and Mo Salah as captain. So exactly the same midfield. That's interesting. That seems to be the new template, maybe. And then up front, we've got Ollie Watkins, Haaland, and Alvarez. So that's the difference there. Alvarez in as well, who also scored for Manchester City. So a good week, especially in that midfield and forward area. We take a quick look at the bench. Areola with 1 point, Taylor with 1, Anderson with 1, and Sergio Gomez, just a bench warmer, with no points. Let's take a look at third place then. AFC, Joe Tonali, Martin Hill, 91 points. So a good week again. I mean, this is, I think, probably the first week we've seen so many teams near the 100-point mark. So a really strong week. In goal, we've got Vicario. Really rate him as a goalkeeper, even though he's a Tottenham player. 6 points for him. He looks really, really good. Clean sheet, of course. Romero with 8 points. So the difference between having Udogie and Romero. Romero did stay on and also had a really good game. So 8 points for him. Kieran Trippier as the captain. I'm glad to see it's not just me that did this week. Kieran Trippier captained, 20 points for Trippier. Aurier with 2 points. We've got Diaby with 2. Gordon with 8. That was a really good decision to put Gordon in. He did score for Newcastle. Maddison with 9. Jarrod Bowen with 8. The only West Ham player to really come away with any decent points after the thrashing at the hands of Aston Villa. Erling Haaland, Julian Alvarez and Ollie Watkins up front, which I think is going to be a common theme, which has worked out well this week because they all played pretty well and all scored a goal at least. So yeah, on the bench we've got Areola, Bukayo Saka with 5 points on the bench, Estepignon with 0 and Decisive with 0. I'm assuming Saka was probably on the bench because we didn't know if he was going to be fit or not. He would have been the better option if you look at the RB there, but still a pretty strong week. Let's look at fourth place then, and it is Sean Barron. So whilst we're here looking at Sean Barron's team, let's do that deep dive that we was talking about. So 93 points for Barron. He's done really, really well. We've got Turner in goal, and then a back four of Dan Burn, Cher, Van der Ven, and Pau Torres. You know what? That's probably not the most expensive back four you've ever seen, but 2 Newcastle defenders in there. Van der Ven is quite a high scorer. He's been getting quite a few points. Pau Torres is a bit hit or miss, but you know he sometimes gets you some points. That's a pretty decent back four. It's not particularly expensive, and it's left room probably, as we're going to see, for a really expensive midfield and strike force. We've got Martin Ødegaard with 2 points. I've been a bit out of form, Ødegaard, recently. Might be one to consider dropping, but he's always capable of getting that assist or that goal, isn't he? And then we've got Son, 14 points, as we've already discussed. Mo Salah as the captain with 32. And we've also got Luis Diaz, who scored for Liverpool. 6 points for Diaz. Sorry, he didn't score. He got an assist. I got that one wrong. But still, 6 points for Diaz. Erling Haaland with 8 points. Julian Alvarez with 9. Gusto, Hudson-Odoi, Semino and Areola on the bench. So I think probably the moral of this is if you want these high earning players like Ødegaard and Son and Haaland and Alvarez and Diaz all in your team, then go for a very cheap back four and bench. Barron's managed to go for that cheap back four, but has been very effective. So this is actually a good, if you're looking for a back four to fit in these high value players, then this back four is probably as good as you're going to see for the value. I said Kieran Trippier is a must have, and I do believe that, but this is the other way you can go by having a really sort of cheap back four that do score a fair amount of points. So yeah, fair play to Barron, who is in 4th place. And then in 5th place we have Mason Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm not sure if this is the first time this team's been here. Cathal Burke. I don't remember going through them before, but I may have done. So let's go through them again now because they are in our top 5. In goal, we've got Onana, I mean, that's a bit risky, isn't it? You just never know with Onana. But 3 points, not the worst. Better than every other keeper we've seen so far because they've all been Matt Turner. Udogie, unlucky in defence with that 1 point. Fabian Schär, 7 points, really good return. And Matty Cash with 2. We then look at James Maddison. Bruno Fernandes, the first time we've seen him, 7 points. Brian Mbeumo, 14 points for Mbeumo. This is definitely one of his better performing weeks. He's had a few quite low scoring weeks, but 14 points for Mbeumo, really, really good return, and 14 for Heung-min Son. Up front, we have Julian Alvarez, Ollie Watkins, and Erling Haaland. Haaland was captain this week for 16 points. No Salah in this team. So imagine what the points total could have been if Mo Salah was in and maybe captained. On the bench, we have Matt Turner, William Saliba, Botman, and Andre. So that is the bench. Some decent players on there. I mean, Saliba and Botman. Saliba just had a tough fixture against Chelsea, and Botman obviously injured. But maybe if this manager went for some less expensive substitutions, they may have been able to fit Mo Salah in this team. But it's a good point return. So that is the top 5. We have already looked at Barron's team, but we are going to go as we normally do, and we're going to take a quick look at the rest of the teams, the host of the Football Vs Extra podcast. So we'll do this in order. So we've done Barron's. We'll scroll down the list to the next person, which is Billy Campbell here. 100-point week for Billy. The first manager we're going to review that has hit that 100-point barrier. Let's look at this team. Flecken in goal, 6 points already, a really strong start. The Brentford goalkeeper that kept a clean sheet. Diego Dalot in defence, scored for Manchester United, didn't keep a clean sheet, but the goal, 11 points for Diego Dalot. Really good. Udogie with 1 point, we've discussed him. A lot of people have him. This could have been even more. Murillo in defence, 0 points there. So, you know, the points have all been made up later in the team. Mo Salah as captain with 32 points. Heung-min Son, Luis Diaz and James Maddison, as we've already discussed, along with Anthony Gordon, 8 points. So that is maybe one of the best midfield performances we'll see this season in terms of having 5 in there and them all having goal contributions, all scoring at least 6 points. So a really good week for that midfield. Up front, we have Rasmus Højlund, who I think is going to come good. He just doesn't seem to be scoring that many goals in the Premier League at the moment, but worth putting him in because no one really has him. So if he does start scoring, it will separate you from other people. So it's a good pick. Ollie Watkins with 11 is the other. No Haaland in this team at all. Something to note. Looking at the bench, we've got Alvarez, who, you know, if he started instead of Højlund, it would have been even more points. Sanchez, the injured Botman, and Estepinion. So this has been a really good week for Billy, who actually got the most points out of anyone from the host of the podcast. So really good week for Billy. We'll continue scrolling down then to the next person, and that would be myself. 82 points. See, I thought I had a good week, and then I saw everyone else's teams, and apparently not so much. 82 points for me. I also took a 4-point deduction because I had a terrible sort of situation going on, injuries and stuff. So let's have a look at the defence, and you can see straight away where I've lost points this week. Matt Turner in goal, we've discussed. I have Kurt Zouma in defence, who, you know what, West Ham have been in decent form recent weeks. 0 points after that drumming at the hands of Aston Villa. Zinchenko was hooked at half-time, I think, or shortly after half-time. In the draw with Chelsea, I think it was at half-time. 0 points for him. Also got a yellow card, so bad luck there. My captain was Kieran Trippier, 20 points, which was a very bold decision. Again, I've seen obviously a few people have done that now, but it wasn't the worst. I could have. I mean, he did better than what Haaland would have done, for example. And that's who I normally captain. We look at midfield. We've got Mo Salah, 16 points. We've gone through Luis Diaz, James Maddison, and I had Thomas Souček. And the reason I had Thomas Souček is A, because he's 4.9 million and he's quite cheap, and he does come up with goals from sort of corners and set pieces. He does seem to score quite a bit for West Ham, but I'm not sure he'll survive this week. This week's transfer round. So, and then up front, the normal really: Haaland, Alvarez, and Watkins. So decent week, 82 points, but not enough to keep ground with the people at the top end of the table. Areola on the bench, Gilmour, Lamptey, and Reguilon. So I've got two injuries there, Gilmour and Areola. And I'm in 17th place. We will scroll down then to the last person of the host, and that is Tom. We go all the way down here to 33rd. Tom actually did better than me this week. 87 points. Just he's quite a bit off, so trying to catch up. Nick Pope in goal, 7 points. That's the best goalkeeping performance we've seen out of anyone we've looked at so far. 7 points for Pope. Dunk with 1. Akanji -1, that red card, denting his points total, and Matty Cash with 2. So defence has been really poor. No Kieran Trippier, no Newcastle defender, although they do have the goalkeeper. We've got Son with 14, Maddison with 9, Mo Salah the captain with 32. Looks like everyone's pretty much captained him or Trippier this week, and one has captained Haaland, I think. Odegaard with 2, and Anthony Gordon with 8. Up front, we've got Alvarez and Darwin Núñez with 4. Ollie Watkins on the bench with 11 points. That's really unlucky, really, isn't it? And I know for a fact that actually Lewis Dunk was on the bench and Tommy actually had Dummett in defence, so they have been switched around because Dummett doesn't play for Newcastle like ever. But yeah, that is Tom's team. Okay, so now we've finished looking at the teams, we're going to take a quick look at the fixtures as we normally do and the player performances. Let's take a look at the stats. We'll look at the total points first as that's what has come up. This is for the whole of FPL from game week 1 up until now. Who is performing the best in the Premier League, FPL-wise, and who should you be putting in your teams? The top 3 may not surprise you. We've got Mo Salah, who is actually top of the list now after some really good weeks, overtaking Haaland. You've also got Ollie Watkins, 70 points. He's actually overtaken Haaland as well. So, and Heung-min Son is in 3rd. So the top 3 performing players is Salah, Watkins and Son. Haaland is in 4th. So now, does that make you think Haaland has had a drop off for Manchester City? Like, he's not the same as he was last season. Which is good for FPL, I think, because everyone having him in and captaining him every week was terribly boring. So even though a lot of people still got him, including myself, he's not always going to be my captain, and I think that that's important. We've got Kieran Trippier, who is the highest scoring defender in FPL, 59 points. As I mentioned before, vital player to have. Bukayo Saka and Jarrod Bowen, 58 points, with Julian Alvarez on 57. Really good season for him so far. James Maddison on 56, and Buemo, people predicted he'd have a good season without Ivan Toney, and he is. 54 points for him. Anderson on 51, and Douglas Luiz on 49. So that's as far down as we will go. But if you haven't got any of these players, or you're thinking about making transfers, these are the players that you probably want in. We'll go through the fixtures in a moment to see which one's probably more favourable. And let's have a look at the round points. So the points that were achieved this past game week. Let's see who's in first place. It's actually Jacob Murphy for Newcastle. I think he scored twice, maybe got an assist as well. Jacob Murphy, really good player, really rate him. Jacob Murphy. So yeah, 17 points. Mo Salah with 16, as you would expect, 2 goals in the Merseyside derby. Douglas Luiz also scored twice, once from the spot, gets 15 points. And Buemo on 14 with Mudryk and Son. Chris Wood on 13 points. Really good week for him. Don't think he's owned by many people. 0.7% of you own Chris Wood, so not going to be one that's particularly relevant. But he does seem to start more games, especially I think the Forest regular striker is out injured, so 4.9 million. If you need somebody to maybe fill a bench spot, maybe he's a good pick. Diego Dalot on here as well with 11 points. Kieran Trippier with 10. Declan Rice with 9, of course, scored in that 2-2 draw with Chelsea. Julian Alvarez also on 9 points. So they are the top performing players of this game week. And finally, let's move on to the fixtures. We'll take a look at who is playing whom this coming week. We'll start with Friday Night Football. We've not had a Friday Night Football in a while. Just a reminder to make sure you get your teams all ready before that game, because we easily get caught out, don't we, when it's not a Saturday. Crystal Palace versus Spurs. It's under the lights at Selhurst Park. Tottenham could slip up here. Tottenham have been very impressive this season, but if Crystal Palace away in the evening is a hard fixture, so it looks easy on paper, but I don't think it is. I think Tottenham might struggle here. Chelsea versus Brentford. Chelsea look to be in really good form now. I know they threw away that 2-0 lead against Arsenal, but they played very, very well, and I think the Chelsea are a good team now to start maybe putting in some attacking assets. I'm not too sure about their defence, but maybe some attackers if you can work out who is actually going to start. I mean, Raheem Sterling is probably the one to go to if you're going to put in any Chelsea assets. Arsenal versus Sheffield United. You would think this would be a good game for the Arsenal lads. Again, not sure who's going to start. Jesus limped off in midweek, so I'm not sure if that means Nketiah is going to be starting. Trossard's been in good form, but he's unlikely to start ahead of Saka and Martinelli. Martinelli seems to have found a goal scorer in form as well. Maybe Martinelli's the one you might want to put in if you are looking to bring in Arsenal assets. Bournemouth versus Burnley, pretty standard. Probably not many people have any Bournemouth or Burnley assets. Burnley do leak goals though, so if you're looking at putting in someone like Philip Billing for Bournemouth, that could be something that could work. Wolves versus Newcastle. Wolves don't score a lot of goals. Newcastle don't concede a lot of goals. Even though it's at Wolves, I would double down on Newcastle defenders if you are in the market for new defenders. Lots of games on Sunday then. We'll start off with West Ham and Everton. I think West Ham will bounce back. West Ham being at home. They seem to do quite well on the Sunday afternoon kickoffs, to be honest, other than last week, of course. I think West Ham will do okay here. So if you've got West Ham assets, then keep them in maybe. Not many people do, but Aston Villa versus Luton. Oh yes, load your team up with Villa players. That is a game where you want your Douglas Luiz or your Ollie Watkins and players like that. I think the stat with Douglas Luiz is that he scored in his last 6 home games in a row. I think they said on commentary last week. Aston Villa are at home in this one, and he's the penalty taker for Aston Villa. So I am personally going to try and get him in my team this week. Brighton versus Fulham. Fulham don't look very good at the moment. Brighton are a little bit hit and miss recently, but you still bet on them to beat Fulham. So if you've got Brighton attackers, maybe time to keep them. But Matoma seems to be not hitting the form he hit last season, so not many people own Matoma. In fact, nobody that we reviewed today had Matoma in their team. Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest. This is a good game for Liverpool. A lot of people have got Salah and Diaz or Nunez or Gakpo or Jota or a combination of those players. This is probably a good week to load up on those. Man United versus Man City is a tough game on paper, but you know what Man City did to Man United last season? Of course, they lost the game at Old Trafford though, so yeah, this is one I may even go back to captaining Haaland. He scored a hat-trick against them last season, but there's other fixtures there, such as Liverpool Forest and Villa Luton, that are probably more appetising if you're looking to captain a player that's going to get a big point haul. So that is it for the FPL show for this week. I hope you've got something from this and you've been able to maybe come up with some ideas of who you're going to put in your team. Don't forget the early FPL deadline this week will be Friday, an hour before kickoff, I think it is, on Friday, not Saturday. But I'll be back next week, hopefully on the Wednesday, with a roundup of next week's action and to look forward to the week after. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next week on the podcast and FPL shows.